I am a fourth-generation medical doctor in my family. Worked as a physician in Russia for several years. I immigrated to US in my early 40s because of my second marriage. I had 3 children. That time they were 15, 13, and 6. I desperately wanted to get my license and continue to work in US, and my husband was very supportive of the idea. In order to do it, I had to take and pass 3 USMLE tests, the ones that all medical school students in US had to take, and I also had to get into a medical residency. My English spoken language was functional, but I couldn't read too well. It was 7 huge books in front of me just for the first exam, and when I started, I read 1 page a day with a dictionary. I was reading and soaking pages with my tears. I was basically learning English by preparing to the exam American Med. School students had taken after the second year of school. I studied for 10-12 hours a day. My sons were in swimming and water polo teams, and I missed all their meets, my biggest regret. But I cooked for the family and did some other chores. I went to Kaplan classes, created for the students like myself. It was lecturing on the anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and other subjects. The classes were very expensive. We had to borrow money. I took my first exam in 2 years. I wasn't completely ready and too aggressive, but I heard that more time passes after practicing medicine, harder to get into a residency. This was my biggest mistake. The exam was for 8 hours, about 70 seconds for each question. Many of them were cross-discipline, some of them I had to scroll down. I failed the exam. I think mostly because I needed more time to read and comprehend the questions than a native speaker did. I passed USMLE, from the second attempt. Then I passed the other 2 exams with respectable score. I started to volunteer in different hospitals and did lots of work from pushing the stretches to doing a paperwork. I visited Medical Open for students' meetings and tumor boards weekly. I went to a family physician programs fair in Kansas and met and talked to many program directors and chief residents from all over the country. In order to get into a medical residency, you have to go through a match. You have to register for match in the fall, put on their site your resume, your scores, a cover letter, and at least 3 letters of recommendations from the American doctors you actually worked with. Then you send it to the different programs, which is also very expensive. Then you get an invitation for an interview, if you get one. You go to the interviews in the fall and winter. Then in spring, you have to put programs that interviewed you in an order: 1T, 2D, 3D, and so on. The programs do the same, putting people they interviewed in an order. Then everything's going into match, and if the interests are matched, you get a residency. What I found out, because of high competition, the programs don't even look at resumes of applicants who fail at least 1 exam. The programs have usually 6 to 10 residency positions, and their goal to get as many American graduate students as they can. It's usually 1 to 2 positions left for the foreign doctors. I had to compete with numerous Indian doctors, most of them were in their 20s, had perfect scores and knew English since kindergarten. There were also Pakistanis and many others. Because I was so proactive and program directors liked me when they actually talked to me, I managed to get few interviews. They were all over the country from Tennessee to Oklahoma to Pennsylvania. I went to all of them. Most of them went well. But I didn't match. I had to repeat everything starting from next fall. I didn't match again. My 3rd year, I found a volunteer position in a psychiatric hospital. It was very promising. The only big problem it was in the different state. And I had to rent an apartment and live separately from my family. I started in 1 unit and was a bit lost at the beginning. Everything was new to me, but it felt like a real job and I learned a lot. In 2 months, I was transferred to the other psychiatric unit. My new boss was also a director of the psychiatric residency program. He was extremely busy and also had health problems, went through 2 surgeries during my work. Most of the time, I was the only doctor in the unit. I was admitting and discharging patients, writing the admitting notes, talking to the patients, running the meetings with the relatives, and so on. That year, I applied only for one program. I thought I did everything to earn my right to be in the program. I learned a lot, and I was ready for a residency. But they didn't select me. I've heard that the doctor I worked for the first 2 months didn't recommend me. But who knows? What was the real reason? They told me that I could work more for them, and maybe they would consider me next year. My youngest was an early teen that time, and started acting out when I was not home. I had to drive several hours back and force on weekends, just to be with my family for few hours. My husband was exhausted, stressed, and said he couldn't tolerate fighting with our youngest anymore. I was tearing myself and decided that my family was more important to me. I got burned out. It took 7 years of my life, and I never got it. Some people maybe wonder, how come we have the shortage of doctors in the country, and it's so hard to get into a residency? The reason is that there is the discrepancy between the demand for doctors and residency positions. But one can't become a licensed physician without going through a residency. I've heard now they are expanding med schools, but the quantity of the residency positions stay the same. So even American med students are having a hard time to find a spot in a residency. It's different in other countries. My best friend in med, school classmate, immigrated to Greece. As soon as you learn the language and pass the exams, you are eligible for a residency there. If one can't get a position immediately, she should wait, sometimes for a couple years. But she is already on the list. My classmates that immigrated to Germany and Sweden also didn't have too much of a problem to get their license.